May 1981, Raisina Hill. A very secretive document reaches Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's office for her approval. It was about the launch of a highly classified mission to establish an Indian presence on the other end of the world, to establish a base on the most coldest, driest, and most desolated continent on the planet, Antarctica. And this is the story of that mission, codenamed Gangotri. But why we have to go to Antarctica? Not only it is on the opposite end of the Indian Ocean, plus it's expensive and dangerous. It's the coldest place on the planet, with average temperature remaining below minus 10 degrees, and which can go as down as minus 60 degrees during peak waters. Not just that, it's the world's windiest and driest place. And these are the reasons why Antarctica remained untouched by humans for millions of years. To give context, we humans discovered Neptune, a planet, before first human ever laid their eyes on Antarctica in 1820. And the reason is, it is very hard to reach it. Plus we are talking about India of 1980s. We had just came out of emergency, which caused us great financial pain because of the sanctions imposed. And we were even a poorer country than we are today. Why go to frozen Antarctica? Well, because it is frozen now, but it will not remain frozen in future. When it was first discovered by a Russian ship in 1820, Antarctica became the battleground of explorers and adventurers. Brave men from around the world started flocking to it. Braving the cold, they were there to explore it, map, document it. While some were there for their adventure, there were others whose motive was to conquer and colonize the continent. Can you guess who? Well, Europeans. The white man who has to go and civilize and uplift every single inferior creatures like penguins? Well, all these great powers like Britain, France, Russia, Norway, America started descending upon the continent. With their massive ships and sheer will, they started dividing a freaking continent like a pizza. Some of these claims were absolute bizarre. I mean, what the hell countries on the other end of the planet like Norway, UK, US or even Russia have to do with Antarctica? It was a pure attempt of colonizing and resource capture. Because Antarctica has resources, minerals, gas, and sweet oil, 530 billion barrels. Only one problem. These resources cannot be extracted, at least yet. Because extraction and exploitation of these resources will lead to a climate catastrophe of proportions that has never been seen in human history. You see, as long as Antarctica remains frozen or it's ecologically remain preserved, it is best for all of us. Because if Antarctic glaciers melt, it will lead to a bloody 70 centimeter rise in sea level. To put it in perspective, if that happens, every single coastal city in the world will be destroyed. And given the fact that more than half of human population lives within 100 kilometers of coast, it will lead to a humanitarian crisis that we have never seen. And knowing this fact, these countries got together and they signed a treaty, which they called as the Antarctic Treaty. It was an exclusive treaty of those members who, managed to reach Antarctica before them, and it gives them exclusive right of establishing research and scientific stations. But that didn't happen. These countries did not relinquish their claim on Antarctica. They just delayed their exploitation of it. And this is where India comes into picture. India has a huge ocean named after it, and no significant country stands between India's coast and Antarctica, which leads to India's strategic mindset. We believe that Indian Ocean region should be India's own backyard, and our navy must be able to absolutely dominate these waters. And having a base or a series of bases till Antarctica will help us achieve exactly that. That was the vision of our leaders, and that is why India was going to Antarctica. Only one problem. We had never done this before, and neither we knew how. Because reaching Antarctica itself is a nightmare. The ocean surrounding the continent remained frozen for 8 months, and then there is a narrow gap between November and February when they are less frozen. But even in those months, it requires a special type of ships known as the icebreakers to get there. And they were mainly produced and used by countries of the West like US, Britain, which at the time, to say the least, were not very friendly. Because it was the 80s, we had pissed them off. First, we defeated their beloved Pakistan and divided the country into two.
The Chief of Army Staff summarily rejected the terms and demanded unconditional surrender, pledging full rights and privileges under the Geneva Convention.
Then we went on to test nuclear weapons, which they were not very happy about.
India conducted a series of nuclear explosive tests.
And then we were increasingly getting into the Soviet influence.
In November of 1971, herself made a trip to Belgium, Austria.
And if they get to know, oh look, the country we hate so much is coming to set up a base in continent that we want to exploit, govern. Because we had no friends among the Western countries. Fortunately for us, there was one country which had both the resources and experience of Antarctic exploration, and which at the time, like India, was non-aligned, and that was Norway. Norway had a history of Antarctic exploration. In fact, it was a Norwegian, Roald Amundsen, who became the first person to reach Earth's South Pole. So they were cool, and we could rely upon them. The Norwegians specifically had what we lacked, and that was resources and an ice-breaking ship. This one, known as the Polar Circle, and acquiring it as soon as possible was essential because the Norwegian company which owned the ship was willing to sell it to the highest bidder. To ensure that the ship is acquired, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi sent a very high-level delegation consisting of senior officers of Indian Air Force and Indian Navy, along with two very important men, Dr. Sehgal and Dr. Qasim. These were among the people who knew about this top-secret mission from the beginning, and those who proposed this mission to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi herself. November 1981, this high-level delegation left for Norway. An excuse was given out to the world that they were there to attend a climate conference. Keeping the mission secret was absolutely essential in order to prevent a potential sabotage from countries who might not want India to succeed. The Norwegians put out a very specific demand, and that was that the captain of the ship must be a Norwegian and his command will be binding upon all. This was a little bit complicated as it would have greatly reduced the Indian autonomy in the mission. But accepting these demands was essential because India lacked experience in Antarctic exploration, and there was one other reason. Norway was a part of the Antarctic Treaty, and they were willing us to provide a landing spot on the area of Antarctica they claimed. This spot, known as the Queen Maud's Landing. And for these two very specific reasons, Indian crew agreed to their demands and a deal was struck. After this, training exercises were held for the crew of Operation Gangotri in Kashmir and in Ladakh. Both of these places stimulated the sub-zero temperature of the Antarctic continent. And on November 26, 1981, the Polar Circle arrived in Goa. The ship was loaded with all the necessary equipment, snow equipment, snowmobiles, and also with two Navy helicopters. And finally, by mid-December 1981, the ship departed from Goa. It arrived in Mauritius and made a 10-day stoppage there. After this, the ship finally left for Antarctica, and a message was given out to the world. India was going to Antarctica. It was easier said than done because this was the most monumental challenge of the war. Antarctica doesn't welcome visitors. It's a graveyard of ships and explorers. The ocean water surrounding the continent remained frozen for good 8 months, making the continent inaccessible for most of the year. And the 4 months, which are of relative warmth, are also dangerous because melting of ice in these months create, well, icebergs. Remember icebergs? And the other reason is what we call as the ship entrapment, which happens because of blizzards. These are literally ice streams traveling at massive speed, freezing everything in their path, and Antarctica is the playground of these beasts. If any ship is unfortunate enough to be hit by one directly, it literally freezes the water around them, bringing the ship to a complete halt and putting the lives of its crew in jeopardy. This is what Operation Gangotri crew feared the most, because we had already tested the other Antarctic Treaty members. Help from them was an uncertainty. The Polar Circle and its crew were on their own. Avoiding the blizzard was our only hope. Around 1st Jan 1982, the crew laid their eyes on the frozen continent. They were welcomed by a view of a 50-meter tall ice wall stretching all the way. They have arrived at the continent, but landing on it will be a very different ballgame. The day had a very poor visibility, and navigating a massive ship through the most dangerous water with floating iceberg was a very, very difficult task. Knowing the risk of ship entrapment, the captain ordered the pilots of the two Navy helicopters to take flight and to confirm whether there was clear water ahead or not. Because if they were not, the captain was not willing to take the risk and the mission had to be aborted. All things hinged upon a clear water passage. The two helicopter pilots took off, and with them was Dr. Qasim. The helicopters kept hovering for hours over the continent, hoping to find a clear passage. But due to poor visibility that day, they were not able to do that. Knowing that being unable to find a clear passage will totally fail the mission, the crew of Operation Gangotri took the greatest risk of that all. They returned to the Polar Circle and falsely assured the captain that they saw a clear passage ahead. They took a leap of faith and went into the white abyss. But it was worth it. Much hinged on the success of Operation Gangotri. Not only it would prove India's scientific prowess to the world, but it will set a pride among Indians for generations to come, to take the risk with whatever you have and give it your all. Morning of January 9th, 1981. A picture was sent out to the world of two men posting the tricolor. They were accompanied by two adorable natives, penguins. The Polar Circle reached the Antarctic shore without a scratch. India had successfully landed on Antarctica. And with this, a message was sent out to the world. No matter how resource challenged we are, if our will is deeper than ocean and our determination is harder than rock, we can achieve whatever we want.